Hi guys, it's Kelly here. Long time no see. I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today I am using the Apple Barrel Lovely Layers, the Spring Greenery, the Wildflowers, and then I pulled out the mini holiday florals, but I actually didn't end up using those. Pulled out a bunch of sentiments. This Blessings of Spring, really like that. I actually ended up going with this one, which is the Be Still set, and as you can see from the stamp set, I have used it quite a bit. So today we are going to be doing a little bit of work with Distress Oxides versus Distress Inks. Now, my original intention of this video was kind of like to show you the difference between the two, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And I will still do that, but I'm going to be quite honest with you. I was quite surprised at how similar the cards came out, even though we started with two different bases. So the first little test that we're doing is the ink blending. I am using the Honeybee blender brushes for this, and I'm going to do them the same way. I'm kind of doing a bluish sky and a greenish ground. And so for that, I'm using Salvage Patina, Salty Ocean, and Mermaid Lagoon. This is obviously the Distressed Ink side, which is the one that I prefer. There's nothing wrong with oxides. They just work differently. And I have a tendency to reach for my Distress Inks over my oxides, which is actually what prompted this video. So the Salvage Patina goes on first because I like the way that blends out into the white. Then the Salty Ocean, and then finally the Mermaid Lagoon to kind of build up that blue in the corner for our sky. Typically for this one, I don't have to go back and blend a second time because I like that blue to blend out into white. For the grasses, again, I'm going to use that Twisted Citron, and this is going to blend up into our white. So leaving that little bit of, you know, is it a cloud? Is it some reflective light? Like this, you know, little white area in between. And then I will use Mowed Lawn and then Rustic Wilderness. Now the green I do twice. I do blend it twice. Maybe that's a better way to say it. I do blend it twice because I feel like that does give me a better blend, and that is traditionally how I use most of my Distress inks for my backgrounds. Now, I'm going to do the Distress Oxide one the same way, and you will see some differences in them, even though we're using the same colors and the same application style, also in the same pattern. And the reason that is because Distress inks are dye inks. That means that they are transparent. And so, and they also, specifically to Distress inks, they are made to stay wet longer. That's why they blend so nicely. Distress Oxides are a hybrid ink. So they're kind of like a combination of a dye ink and a pigment ink, which means they are more opaque. Everybody makes fun of the way I say opaque. You know what? I know it's spelled with a Q. Okay, that's all I'm going to say, and we're going to move on from there. We're going to move on from there. So you can see here using the Salvage Patina, because it does have those pigment ink properties, is a little bit more difficult to blend out to white, to blend out softer. They generally go on just a little bit thicker. This does make them easier to blend overall, though, because of those pigment ink properties. It does stay wet quite a bit longer. Distress Oxides also stamp better than Distress inks. The Distress inks with the dye inks, they do not stamp very well. Distress Oxides stamp marvelously, just because they are a little bit, you know, thicker. So here you can see I am going back over the sky just to help it kind of blend out. My area for my sky is also larger because I have to do a little bit more work to get it to blend out into that white. So you do want to make sure you're cleaning your work surface. I'm using a glass mat. But you don't want to make sure that you're cleaning that up in between so we're not picking up any unwanted color. But again, I'm, you know, using the Twisted Citron and I think I do blend these twice as well. And there's just less white space on this just because it's more challenging to get that white area. Is it a make it or break it for this particular card? No, so I'm not bothered by it, but just something to share there. The other thing about oxides, because they do have that pigment property and they are more solid, they're more of the opaque color, they kind of sit on top of each other. So it does make them a little bit like they blend easier because it's a smoother transition because they stay wet longer, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to blend one color into another color family. So here, for the rest of the video, the one on the right will be the Distress Oxides. The one on the left will be the Distress Inks. And so here I wanted to kind of play around with how they react with the water. And so I have my smooth backgrounds. You guys know if you watch my channel, I do like to do some clean water spatters in the background, as well as some perfect pearl spatters, just to make the backgrounds a little bit more interesting. So that's what I'm doing here. They both bleach out with the clean water, but the one with the Distress ink does go lighter. And again, that's probably just because they're more transparent. They both show up about the same for the perfect pearls. It shows up about the same on the surface of the cards. So there was a negligible difference. I think maybe it might be slightly easier to see on the Distress Oxide, just because it's a little bit darker. So then here's those. I'm going to go ahead and set those aside, and then we're going to get into the die cutting, the ink smushing, and the Copa coloring. So I'm cutting these out of watercolor paper. This is my preferred, which is Canson Monteval watercolor paper. It's a cold press. You can use whatever works for you. I've laid out all of the dies, which is all of the wildflowers. This little, what do we even call that? This little lilac looking thing from the Spring Greenery, and then the apple barrel. And I cut 2 of everything. Like if I cut one flower, I cut the same flower again. So that way these cards will be identical in all of the colors that we're going to be using. So I've separated them out because I kept them in 2 different cups to make sure I had enough. And now we're going to start the ink smushing. So again, the Distress ink is on the left, the Distress Oxide is on the right. So I'm just going to tap down my lightest color. In this case, it is Brush Corduroy, and then my darker color is Scorched Timber. And then I'm going to spray it with a couple of sprays of water. And we're also going to talk about how to get different looks for this, this particular technique while we're smushing, okay? If you want a smoother application, you want to add more water. If you want a nice, smooth application, you want to add more water to your pigment, but also wet your paper, and you will get a pretty smooth application. Now you can see on the oxide side, that color is more concentrated. So you can, it's a lot darker than the one on the left because it's not transparent. The Distress ink is transparent. And you'll see throughout this, because I am going to have to speed this up. We got a lot of pieces parts to dip into the water, but these ones I did want to show you in just regular times. So you could see I do go back several times. If you would like more texture, you want to use less water. So you can also, if you like more texture, dry your pieces in between and then dip them back into the color. And that will also give you more texture. So here you can see I'm not adding any more water. I'm just adding more pigment, more of the ink, so that I can get some really good splotches of color. And I think you'll see that once we get into like the actual coloring, how the splotches really help the wood of the barrel to look aged, which is what we want. Because I like to color, I am going to go in and use my alcohol markers to add some more color to these, more shading, but you don't have to. You know, if you're happy with the way that they're looking without any extra shading, that's totally cool. So here, like I said, I just wanted to show you how many times I'm going back until I'm happy with it. So if you find yourself like you're like, oh, this is the third time I've done it, you're not alone. Okay, yeah, I did it 3 times too. And then again, we're just making sure that we're cleaning up our work surface in between so that we don't contaminate any of the other colors. So here we are again, we are sped up at this point. This is Hickory Smoke and Black Soot, and this is for the band of the barrel, both of those pieces. One of the things that I struggle with oxides, and it took me a minute to figure out kind of why. I was like, why don't I like them as well? Like, I know that they're softer, they dry back to a chalkier finish. So it's kind of tricky because they coat better, like their colors coat better in this particular application. You can see like we already have more ink built up on the right-hand side where the oxides are versus the left-hand side. But the problem is it dries matte and like just has that chalky finish. It reminds me of oh, this was a trend like way back when. I don't even know if you guys are gonna know what I'm talking about. It was probably like 10 years ago. Velvet nail polish. Velvet nail polish was like, went on like regular nail polish, but so when it was wet, it was shiny. And then when it dried, it would be kind of soft and flat. I tried so hard to get on the bandwagon for the velvet nail polish, and I could not do I could not do it. So anywho, going through and doing each of these, the oxides almost remind me of like if you mixed your food coloring with milk instead of water. Like that's the effect to me that it gives. Now that I'm not saying that it's not pretty or that it's not useful. It just, for me, I feel like because of that softness and that chalky effect, it's less contrast, which if you have less contrast, you automatically have less dimension. And since as a colorist, my whole goal is to add dimension, I don't want something that's going to make it's going to make me have to work harder. Now, I will say in doing this little experiment, because originally it got brought up in the 10-year, the Honeybee 10-year anniversary event that went on this weekend, which we'll circle back to that too. It's a long video, guys. It's 30 minutes. We got lots of story time. Originally, people in there were like, all I had, like the watercolors that were listed, like all I have is oxides. Will that work, or do I need distress inks? And trying to explain to people, like, it's not that it won't work for the technique, because it will, but it will look different. It will not be as dimensional because of that, you know, that kind of softness factor. So that's how I ended up here. I do think I would like to revisit this in another type of video, where maybe it was a more like, what can you do with oxides versus what you can do with distress inks? And I feel like I did that a couple of years ago, but even like here, like with the bluebells, you'll see when I flip them over, these are so much more transparent. They're coated, but you can see the white of the paper. Whereas over on the Distress Oxide side, they're almost already completely solid. And because of that, it is harder to create that dimension, because your values are kind of already decided for you with the amount of pigment that is placed with the oxides. So we're just going to move on doing this. This is Wilted Violet and Salty Ocean. I think I forgot to show that to you, so my apologies. And then we'll talk about the yellow one or the orange one when we get there. So you may have noticed that I haven't posted a video in over a week. And the last video that I posted, I was telling you guys about how excited I was to meet you in person at the Honeybee Happy Birthday event. I did not go to the Honeybee Happy Birthday event. It just didn't work out. So you guys know from watching my channel, I've shared just a little bit that my mom has had some more health problems in the last year than previously. And she ended up with an infection that she had to go be admitted to the hospital. And I mean, I couldn't leave. I just couldn't leave while she was in the hospital. She's still in the hospital, and they're still trying to find the source of the infection that's making her so sick. But like Honeybee was so wonderful. Let's talk about what's going on here. So this is the one thing about the oxides I think that is the biggest hang up for me. So both of these are carved pumpkin, and you can see the Distress ink is a very bright orange, whereas the Distress Oxide looks yellow. And like I double checked, like, did I accidentally pull the mustard seed? Nope, that's what you saw me just do there, just like swipe it down. It's not. It is the carved pumpkin, and obviously one is orange and one is not. And so here, this is the actual mustard seed, because I wanted to show, like on the left-hand side with the orange, the yellow doesn't sit on top of it. It actually pulls the carved pumpkin out. You can see the puddle get darker, whereas with the oxides, one will sit on top of the other. And then these are just the like the centers of the flowers. This is mustard seed and brushed corduroy. And then what else are we going to do? We're going to do some mowed lawn, some mustard seed, just singles. And then for the poppy, we'll do black soot and the hickory smoke. So anyway. So this, like my mom ended up going into the hospital on Tuesday morning, and I was supposed to fly out. Well, my husband and I were supposed to fly out on Wednesday morning. And like our flight was at like 5:30 in the morning because I'm coming from Ohio, East Coast, all the way to Oregon, far, far West Coast, right? And so we were going to have to do a lot of layovers. So we were supposed to fly from Cleveland to Chicago, Chicago to Sacramento, Sacramento to Oregon. Let's go back and talk about what's happening here. So now everything has all the watercolor done, and you can see the one on the left here with the Distress ink, how much more contrast it has versus the one on the right-hand side, which is the oxides. It doesn't have as much contrast. And again, different doesn't mean bad. Different just means different. And so depending on what kind of look you're going for, would depend on what kind of ink you wanted to use. Or maybe for you, it comes down to ease of use and, one kind of ink is in your budget and you go with the oxides. I totally get it. And it's no judgment. I'm just showing you the difference between the two and explaining why I reach for one over the other. So here I am going to go through, and for these ones, the coloring is sped up. This is a long video. We're fitting a lot of content in a short amount of time. I am going to color both of the apple barrels so that you can see them. And then from here on out, I'm going to speed up the coloring, and you'll see me color everything. Like I'll color the poppy, I'll color the bluebells, I'll color the little I said lavender before. They're probably more like hyacinths. But I'll color all of those. You just might not see both of them, but you will see them at the end. So anyway, I was supposed to leave on Wednesday morning, and my dad actually had called me Tuesday morning to say that he had to call the ambulance. So Tuesday all day we were in the hospital trying to figure it out. And then we weren't sure what we had exactly. So I moved my flight from Wednesday morning, because Wednesday morning was set up for the event. So I moved it from Wednesday morning to Thursday afternoon, because Thursday evening was registration. So I was like, okay, that will buy me all of Tuesday, all of Wednesday, and then Thursday to figure out what is going on. So we ended up, moving our flight, paying the fare, paying the fare difference, thankfully, because I knew kind of what our situation was, with mom. Like, I had already, like, the tickets that I booked on purpose, knowing that, if I couldn't go, I was gonna, have to move them or need a refund or whatever. So I changed the flight and paid the fare difference, which I have to tell you was $800. Was $800 to change the flight. So I did that, changed our rental car. I couldn't do the hotel because Honeybee had graciously booked that for me. So I did touch base with Lisa from Honeybee and let her know what was going on. And they were so, so kind. Like, hey, we will figure it out. Whatever you need to do, family first, which just touches my heart. And I know that I have told you guys, who've been with me for years, that, like, crafters are the best kind of people, and the companies that I work for, and stay with, are because they are genuinely kind, wonderful people. And Honeybee is absolutely the epitome of that. Like, they were nothing but supportive in whatever it was that I needed. Like, there was no, like, you have an obligation, you have to make it here. There was none of that. Nothing but just loving support. And there will never be enough words for how grateful I am, for that. So, by the time Wednesday evening had kind of rolled around and we really still didn't have any answers about what we were doing. And of course my mom was like, you need to go. And I'm like, you're insane. Because if this was Graham laying in this bed, like, my mother wouldn't have gone anywhere. Like, she wouldn't have gone anywhere. So anyway, by the time Wednesday evening rolled around, like, I knew I wasn't leaving. I just couldn't. And so, when I talked to Honeybee, they offered, which was, again, so kind of them, to do it more of like a live retreat, where they would kind of like stream me in so that I could still teach the class if I wanted to, which I did. Because I wanted to be there and meet you guys and see you guys. I had already met with my doctor to get all my meds and everything. um, so, so anyway, that did end up working out, even though technology was just not my friend. We did end up finding a way to make it work. But so I am home. I've been, obviously all of us have been up at the hospital visiting mom every single day. And so today, once I am done with my things that I am doing here, such as my voiceover, I will be heading back up there. As you guys know, my kids are little petri dishes, and we had already made arrangements for our kiddos while we were gone, so that they would have care. And so we just kept those things in place. My in-laws have been just priceless. Like, they've been so helpful, in taking care of Caitlin. And, because you don't have to tell me, like, I'm her mama. That 3-year-old is a handful. Okay. You get tired. But I don't know, maybe grandparents don't. Maybe they don't, I don't know. But so they have very generously kept her, so that way I didn't have to worry about Eric or myself, like, had to worry about childcare while we were trying to do things for my parents, go up and see my mom and make sure, that she always had somebody with her. So that's just kind of like what the week has been. And as we head into next week. I know one of the trials that they're doing to try to help boost her immune system is like a 5-day course. Today is day 4 of that. But until her numbers come up, she will not be, they won't let her come home until she's in a better place where her body's able to stabilize her immune system on its own. So, we'll just have to, figure it out from there, come up with a schedule, just like, we were doing before. We kind of had a schedule for who was, helping with dinner, who was cleaning the house, who, and thankfully, I don't know how people with no siblings do it, because there's 3 of us. And even then, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. And there's never been a time. My kids are sick all of the time. Like, they're just always ill. Oh, I know it's because, school, daycare, all of those things. So I am usually the one more often than my siblings who has to be like, I can't, Peanut's sick. I can't come. And then they just pick up my slack so generously. Or if it's a day where the kids are sick and I can't go, like I will make them dinner and drop it off on their porch or whatever. I just don't want to risk exposing them. They're not spring chickens anymore. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So here, these little, we're calling them hyacinths, aren't we? What are grape hyacinths? I'm probably not even saying it right. Anyway, I did the little dots. I like the little dots for that. This one here is a poppy, and those are traditionally red, but since we kind of had a spring bouquet going on, I decided that I was going to go with pink, because I felt like pink was, I don't know, on Wednesdays we wear pink kind of thing. Like it was pretty. But this is one of the ones that I think, just like the barrel, that the difference between the oxide and the Distress ink is the most prevalent. If you look at the actual petals, even though the one on the right, the oxide does have some pools of darker color, it actually does not look that much darker. Where the one on the left with the Distress inks, you can very clearly see where there were pockets of darker color. And doing this technique, like that is what you want. You want to be able to see, that added texture that the watercolor ink smushing gives it. So I'm not, they're both pretty. It's a preference between the two. So here I treated this one kind of like I normally treat my lovely layers, which is I laid them down on top of each other and marked their shadows, and then, went ahead and shaded them like I would if it was a stamped image. But the one that is the Distress ink definitely has some lighter highlights in it, just because the initial dipping, smushing, it was more transparent than the other one. So yeah, just those things to keep in mind, especially if you are a person who hasn't purchased them yet. And everybody likes different things, so maybe that will be more for you. So for the inside of the poppy, we're just doing some black and some dark grays. This actually will just fit right in front of that petal that's curled up. So you can go ahead and build the whole flower. I do have some slight regrets about not coloring in the edges of the bottom. You guys know, like, how I did with the bluebells. Like, I took the blue around the edge. I thought that the pink was close enough. But when it's on the card, especially the one for the oxide, it is very white around the edges and you can kind of see it. So you live, you learn. But, yeah. So, if you are a person who is, of the praying kind, we certainly could use some some prayers. That's actually like when I was picking my sentiments for these two cards, how I ended up picking them, like, because I showed you all those different sentiment sets, and they're all great sentiment sets. But the Be Still one has the Psalm quote in it, "Be still and know that I am God." And that's pretty much where I'm at. Like, I have to remember who's in charge, who's in control, and just, just focus on that. I know the things that I know to be true, that he is a kind and a loving God who is doing all things for our good. And that doesn't mean that things won't be hard. But it does mean that he'll be there to support you through it. And so that's it. That's where I'm at. And then the other one says, "Friends like you make the good times even better." And obviously, as you have just heard me talk about the wonderful people from Honeybee and all of the attendees at the event, they were so gracious, because they were expecting me to be there and teaching in person. And I'm sure that there probably was some disappointment, but you would never know it from their kind support and encouragement. So just very, very grateful for the industry in which I am blessed to be a part of. Just wonderful people that I thank you guys so much for all the kind comments and encouragement and prayers. Like, you touched my heart, and I appreciate that. So these, I still don't know what these flowers are, guys. I still don't know. I've used them before in the past, and they're pretty, but I don't know what kind they are. Some kind of wildflower. So you can still see, like, that one on the right, even though I shaded that, like, I picked a shade that I could use both for the one that looked more orange and the one that looked more yellow, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't changing anything. But the one, like the Distress Oxide one, is very clearly yellow. Like, that's not an orange to me. So I went through, I kind of built all of these out. I did not put my barrel together because I need my flowers to be inside my barrel. So once I have everything kind of laid out here, I will then kind of remove the ones that are on the top. One thing I do want to tell you, don't feel like you can't cut these apart. So I cut my leaves off of my stems for, I think, all of my flowers except for the bluebells. And I also trimmed down my stems so that they weren't hanging out the bottom of my barrel. For this one with the hyacinths, I trimmed off the bottom portion, and I actually used that as just kind of some more filler flower. So once I got them glued down, for the top piece of the barrel, I did fill in with some foam tape, because we have layers on layers on layers of paper, and it's watercolor paper, so it's extra thick. So I want to make sure that the bottom of my barrel isn't like sinking down and it's being held up with that foam tape. And so I did that for both of them. I did also put a little bit of liquid adhesive down on the back of my top barrel, so that way would give me a little bit of wiggle room. So it doesn't look like our little barrel is floating in some enchanted forest. I am going to put a little shadow underneath it to give it some ground. Because I chose yellow greens for the bottom, I am choosing yellow green alcohol markers to do my shadow. If you decided that you wanted to use, what was the other combination we used? Lucky Clover and Pine Needles. You could go with the G29, G17, and G05 and blend those out, and that would work really nicely as well. And then I stamped the sentiments in our white pigment ink, and then heat emboss them in white detail embossing powder, and then cut them out with their coordinating dies. There just wasn't enough time for to fit everything in there. And I do also want to note, from the photos, I did add pearls to them from the pastel pearl pack. Like I did the glitters, I did the white highlights, and then I forgot the pearls while the camera was still on, but I did put them on before I took the pictures. So that's it. I hope it was informative for you guys. If there is something specific you'd like to see about inks and oxides, please leave me a comment below. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.